afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. Ali Corman, Justin Nielsen here with a breakdown of the action in today's session. And it looks like tech took a little bit of a breather today, Justin, but there were still plenty of interesting movers out there.
Yeah, so we'll take a look at Mosaic, Ford, and the home builders possibly making another move here. Again, tech took that breather, but a lot of other things, as you said, were looking interesting.
Yes. So first, starting off, let's take a look at the NASDAQ composite here, which finished the day down just a hair, less than 0.1% on the day. Leading the upside, small caps, Russell 2000 up about 0.5%, while the Dow and S&P 500 notched gains of about 0.4% each. So a little bit of a breather, but honestly, not all surprising given the strong ascent the NASDAQ has made over the last 5 or so sessions.
Right. We had 5 consecutive days up in a row, a really strong move off the bottom. And part of that, of course, included the follow through day that we saw on Thursday. So, it's completely in line with, what the market does is it will kind of make moves, take a little bit of a break. And if it could take a break here, that's not a bad thing because some of these tech names were starting to look a little extended. So that could give you an opportunity for some of these to maybe go a little sideways and form some shelves. And we'll get to one of the examples of what a shelf looks like with Mosaic in a little bit. But the S&P 500, by contrast, I mean, that was still powering higher because even though tech was taking that little move down in a lot of names, there were a lot of stocks that were moving higher in the materials, financials, real estate. Some of the areas that the S&P 500 favors a little bit more, industrials and even healthcare, some of the big healthcare names. So the S&P 500 is right there at highs, and again, it's a very big difference from what we were seeing just a few short weeks ago. Kind of letting you know, hey, the market can change quickly, and you have to either change with it or get left behind.
That's exactly right. Yeah, just 9 points or so away from that closing high there on the 3rd. And now let's take a look at small caps because that outperformed today. But what is your assessment of what we're seeing in small caps?
The Russell 2000, small cap index, and we usually pull up the iShares IWM here that we're looking at. That has been the lagging index, but it was showing strength today, a little bit of outperformance. You've got a lot of these areas that were strong today that are represented, especially healthcare and financials. You've got some, real estate names in there. So it does have this broader swath. And again, the smaller cap names, it's nice to see some of that breadth coming in as opposed to being dominated by your Microsofts and Googles that was really driving the previous rally. So it's nice to see a little bit more breadth coming out. So even though tech wasn't as strong today, I don't think that this is necessarily a bad thing for the market. And if we could just real quickly take a look at FFTY, which is the Innovator IBD 50. Now, this is a pretty good representative of growth. But even here, it was basically, recapping yesterday's action. So that's not too worrisome. We're very close to, that new high range out of the February consolidation, that started in February and lasted for a few months. We're almost back to those highs as growth has been acting a lot stronger. So again, this is one of those things where the follow through day happened. Look, I was thinking that we were going to go down more, but we didn't. And so you have to react and do what the market is telling you. And there were these setups that were happening even a little bit before the market had its follow through day. And so if you were there and acting upon those, you're already sitting on some cushion in a lot of your stocks.
Yeah, that's right. And we were breaking down many of those in real time on IBD Live every morning last week, especially. There was a lot to look at in the way of actionable trade ideas. Well, what about one actionable name from today's session? And that is Mosaic, as you mentioned, Justin, forming a little shelf here. So an explosive move that began in late September, clearing this 34 level. So an early entry within this base, eventually breaking out to new highs and then really tightened up here.
And, David Ryan was making the point that he was looking at some of these areas that were out of favor because what we've seen underneath the surface here is a lot of sector rotation. We keep on saying this, so people are probably sick of hearing it, but that's the reality of what we've been dealing with. And so sometimes what can happen is you have these temporarily out of favor names that you've got all this money sloshing around because of what the Fed is doing in terms of 120 billion each month going in to the economy, getting pumped in there. So it's got to go somewhere, and so maybe it moves out of one area into another. So David Ryan was very early on this in terms of looking at Mosaic. So for people that were looking at this, even before the follow through day, you had this action that was looking very strong in Mosaic. It was, starting to outperform even before that follow through day happened. And now it really kind of took a little bit of a break itself. And this is, again, why these breaks are important. So what it did in this case was it held above its 10-day moving average line, let that moving average line catch up a little bit, built what we call a little shelf here. And today it broke out of that. And we actually put this on Swing Trader because as a short-term trade, this could go higher and, we could take a quick profit on it. Or if you had that earlier entry, this would be a great place to just add to your shares. And, again, a smaller amount. You don't want to get too top heavy and drive your average cost up too much. But again, once you have that cushion, you're looking at getting more money into the names that are working for you. And Mosaic has been one that's working. And it's not alone. You've got NTR, CF, and a number of other players in the field that are also looking good in that fertilizer space.
Right. And with swing trade setups, we typically like pullbacks to the 21-day line versus the 10-day line. So how do you go about sizing a position, a new buy here with it only pulling back and not really pulling back, just trading tight and letting that 10-day catch up?
Yeah. So again, if this were a position trade, it would be a little bit different because then you'd have to be looking at, hey, if this comes back to the pivot, at 38.23, or if it comes all the way back down to the 50-day moving average line, is that something that you'd be able to stand? And, really that would be tough. You'd be giving up a lot of ground. But for our purposes, we're really going to be looking at that 10-day moving average line and the lows of just a couple days ago. So that's more like a 4%, a 4% risk. And, if it starts getting into there, that's going to very quickly tell us, look, our thesis was wrong on this. The shelf isn't really in play and didn't offer as good of an opportunity as we thought. And we'll just quickly back away. But that's not giving up much ground for the potential of some pretty large upside if this continues higher.
Okay, well, Ford revved up today, gaining over 4% and some nice volume behind the move. And looking below, look at all of those blue volume spikes as the stock has formed the right side of this cut base, but presented early entries along the way, Justin. So just continuing this strong move today.
Yeah, so it definitely, this is one that had that cross above a downtrend, and it was also getting above the 50-day moving average line again much earlier than the indexes were doing so. So this was kind of an early tell, early relative strength that was happening in Ford, and then it, as the moving averages, or I'm sorry, as the market indexes got up to the levels and started nearing that follow through day potential, getting to their 50-day moving average lines, that's where it kind of broke out of a more traditional area. But, this is still, if you consider forming a cup, this is still in that pattern. So you have that chance to build a cushion before it actually breaks out. And so we did have a couple day pause here, which is, not bad. We could see even more of a pause here and maybe another setup. But here again, I'd be looking to potentially add shares if you've got some cushion on this. But what I really wanted to point out here is, as you mentioned, look at all those blue volume spikes. So you've got the one red volume spike that was 126.2 million shares traded on that day. And look, that was a gap down. It wasn't great. So I'm always looking at what can balance it out. When you have negative action, what positive action can balance that out? And at this point, I think that volume on the upside is really, painting a nice picture. Now, there are a couple of those volume spikes that didn't have great closes, but overall, we're seeing a big sign of accumulation from the institutional investors. And that's something that you really want to pay attention to. Now, of course, earnings season is upon us. Mosaic is coming up in, I think, 12 days, Ford in 7 days. So that is something with both of these that you have to keep in mind.
Yes. And let's also talk about XHB. So home builders on the move today with the XHB ETF now getting back above that 50-day line and then some.
Yeah. And so this one is a little bit closer to that break of the downtrend line. It just got above its 50-day moving average line a couple days ago. It held above it yesterday, even though it was a down day. And now we're powering higher. So it's also important to kind of understand when you have an ETF that you understand a little bit about what is in that ETF construction. So for the home builders here, XHB, which is going off of a Standard and Poor's Home Builder Select Industry Index, this is really kind of spread out amongst a lot of home builders, but also retail plays. You got Home Depot, Lowe's, Floor and Decor, and Williams Sonoma. So RH, a lot of these are in there with some pretty decent weightings, just like the home builders that you would expect. Lennar and Pulte Homes and so on. So it's important to just kind of realize what is making up the index or the ETF that you're trading. And in this case, there are a lot of retail names, and those retail names have been helping this index quite a bit. Now, by contrast, you have something like ITB, which is the iShares, home construction, and this one has a lot more focus on the home builders themselves. So you have your top 4 holdings in this one that are in home builders rather than retail. Retail is in there too, because this is listed as kind of the home construction, but a lot of times they look at supplies as well. So it does have some of those retailers as well. But you've got 40% in the top 4 holdings, and those are all home builders. So, they're both acting well, but it just depends on what you want. Do you want a little bit more retail exposure, or do you want more of a pure play in those home builders?
Good stuff. Thank you, Justin. And thank you all for tuning in. We will be back tomorrow morning on IBD Live. So we hope you tune in investors.com/IBD Live for actionable trade ideas in real time, us analyzing stocks that are setting up. It's earnings season too, so we'll be sure to take a look at stocks that are on the move in reaction to their quarterly reports. So once again, we hope you tune in investors.com/IBD Live. We'll see you right back there tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.